bevo.com.
Simon, I grabbed you after your keynote presentation at Internet World to see if you would do something like this with us. Very honoured to have you here. Thank you for turning up. Simon Calver, CEO of LOVEFiLM. Welcome to Bevo.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Simon, I must apologise for this introductory question, but a lot of people will want to know, and you must get it asked all the time, what is your favourite film?
Yeah, it's a great question, one I get asked all the time, and I tend to give lots of different answers, and people say, well, why is it different? And the reality is it depends what mood you're in, what you've looked at. I mean, Slumdog Millionaire, I just thought was a fantastic film, and will go into my sort of top 10 list. And, if I want inspiration to do energy, then Chariots of Fire is a fantastic film. I love Gladiator, because it's just the, rough and tumble and overcoming odds type thing. Or sometimes rom-coms, but I try not to talk about those too much. But, I think probably on balance, a French film like Jean de Florette or something like that would be a fantastic film.
Fantastic. Gladiator and we both have that in common at least.
Well, I think in business as well, I think you need a bit of, gladiatorial spirit to help you get through it a lot of the time, right? It's never always easy.
Simon, at the Internet World Conference, you were talking about cannibalization. With the amount of disruptive innovators out there in the marketplace, and with India and China obviously now innovating and creating competing products in a global marketplace, how should companies now view cannibalization?
Yeah, I think cannibalization is an incredibly negative word that people think about. To me, if you're going to do something that is going to prepare for the future and change your business model, that's not cannibalization. That's about being smart, right? And really driving the business forward. So it's a mindset. Cannibalization inevitably means there are winners and losers internally. Right? And if you're trying to drive innovation in a business, the last thing you want to do is have winners and losers. So for me, it's about creating these people do X and these people do Y, and together, this is a company and service that we're providing to the customer, right? And the customer ultimately decides. So, get rid of the word cannibalization, don't create winners and losers, and just make sure that you're focused on what is the customer proposition and then how is that changing. And a real good example for LOVEFiLM is, we're heavily into physical DVD. We rent that all the time. Yet I know in 10, 15 years time plus that most people are going to be watching films in a different way, and it's going to be downloaded or streamed. Right? So I have to say it's not about how do I cannibalize my existing DVD, it's how do I make the most of that transition period and what I would call that mixed economy of physical and digital. And who plays what role in the organization? What skills do I need to make that work? And if I can get that blend right, then I know we're going to be winners, not only in the physical world, but in the digital world as well. And it's that mentality and mindset that's really important in business.
Simon, you're clearly number one in the marketplace with LOVEFiLM, but you still have the challenger mentality. In other words, you're continuing to try and do and incorporate new things into the marketplace, like your recent advertising-funded model. So can you tell us about innovation when you're number one and making sure that you're constantly trying new things?
Yeah, I think as you grow as a business, right, you need to set yourselves common enemies, right? The things you're gonna compete against and challenge, right? To your point about being a challenger. And what happens is as you may begin to become stronger in one particular smaller segment of a market, like maybe DVD rental, then you begin to say to yourself, okay, what next? And then you say to yourself, well, it's not about DVD rental, it's about film watching. And who else is offering film watching, and how do we expand the customer set, and who are our next challengers? When we first started off, people laughed at us and they thought that we would become, bigger than high street rental chains or bigger than other people who were in the marketplace. The reality is we have, and now we've got to target the next group, which is the cable and satellite operators, which is TV operators, which is people who are providing film, but not in the sense of competing with them, but in the sense of saying, how can we get people to watch what we have, right, so that we can grow the total pie? Because we are a firm believer that if you're challenging and offering choice, you will grow the pie. And if you grow the pie, there are going to be winners. Everybody's going to win, including the consumer. So, constantly fighting against, what's the best way to watch films? What's the best value you can provide? What's the best way you can get it to a consumer when they want to watch it, how they want to watch it? And, challenging yourself more than anything else. So the reason that I like to build this, if you like, challenger mentality is so that internally you don't become complacent. And you are looking at yourself and you're saying, what can we do next? How do we do that? Because, I've been in lots of situations in business where you achieve the goal that you've set out. It could be leadership in online DVD, sort of rental subsector, for example. And then you go, okay, what next? And the whole organization goes, now it's important to celebrate success, but what's really important as well is to set the next hurdle for the business, because they need a goal and a challenge to go for. And for us, for example, it's going to be about our share of film watching, how we can make that transition from physical to digital and lead the way in digital, how we can get more people to our site to find out about film information. And all of those are challenges in their own right that we need to give people responsibility and accountability for, to begin to drive and make happen, so that we never become complacent. We never sit back and rest on our laurels before, we've won. And to be honest, we're going to be about £100 million revenue this year. I want to try and get to £200 million, and then I want to get to £500 million, and then I want to get to £1 billion. And it's, how big can we make it? And the answer is, as big as we want to.
I watched you speaking at the British Library as well, talking about there's a chance it might be at 99 million this year. That's
right. 99.1 I think is the latest forecast, which is like, come on guys, let's what can we do? How can we drive this forward? But that's another great example of saying, okay, we're not going to be satisfied with our 40+% growth that we have year on year. How can we just get that next milestone? What can we do? And interestingly, when we hit that £100 million run rate, right, which is 8.33 or whatever on a monthly basis, we will pay out a big award for people in the organisation, because that was our next goal, was to try and hit that 100 million run rate. And then we set ourselves a next goal, which could be around growth, it could be around traffic, it could be around profitability. And then when we hit that goal, we'll have a big payout. So linking corporate goals to reward and recognition, to how your staff feel about the business, is incredibly important. And as a chief executive, it's one of the most important things you can do, which is energize a business, give it vision, and give people reward and recognition when you get there.
What's your thoughts on performance-related pay within LoveFiLM? Because there's always, with organisational bonuses, there's always a concern that the low performers that don't really contribute very much also get paid a dividend for the organisation doing well. So are you a believer in organisational bonuses or individual incentives?
So the way we manage bonuses in LoveFiLM, I think, is a bit different from how most people would do it. First of all, if you're growing at the pace we have done, and you've managed acquisitions or integrations or sort of other initiatives that you're managing through, actually setting yourselves annual goals. Certainly if you think about it as a business, if you're doubling in size, right? What does an annual target mean? Because you actually may halfway through the year decide that you're going to do something else, or something else is going to happen. So we set everybody quarterly goals. And as a management group, imagine the management effort required to do this is everybody in the organisation gets assessed each quarter on what they've done. And what we have to be smart as leaders in the organisation is to ensure that actually, if we add up what everybody's doing, that it comes up to the top goal of the company hitting its budget. Right, and that's the bit that you just have to think through as a chief executive, as a leader, to say, is this going to happen? Right, and is that going to be right? So the reason I like to reward people on a quarterly basis is twofold. One is it's immediate. I've got 12 weeks to make an impact, and if I don't do what I need to do or what I've been allocated to do in those 12 weeks, I'm not going to get paid. The percentage of my salary that is bonus, and that can range from anything from 10% to 20% of my salary. So let's take an example. Right? Let's say I'm on 40,000 a year, and I have a PRP, performance-related pay, of £4,000. That's £1,000 a quarter. Right? So I know that actually at the end of a quarter, I can get a £1,000 bonus paid to me, which, trust me, if you're going on summer holidays or you've got Christmas presents or whatever, is a nice way to do it. So one, it's immediate. Right? And why is that important? Because that drives immediate action. And what you can't afford to have is a growing organisation, and as a performance-driven organisation, is no immediacy in your goal setting. The second thing is it rewards me on what I do. And it means that actually I've got to get something done. I may be reliant on other people, and I hope other people have a shared goal in their measures. But it means that I'm pushing in the organisation, I'm driving, and I'm recognising what we have, and that really is an important sort of cultural thing, because It empowers people to make decisions and drive it, because they can't sit there at the end of the quarter and say, I didn't do it because Fred didn't do what he needed to do. And the answer is, well, you know what? Come to me, speak to me. Why wait till now? And if you think about an annual plan, often that's what happens. Well, it was a cold summer, or something else happened, or the bus didn't turn up on time, and there's always reasons why not. And there's enough of us in society of blame culture and not taking responsibility. Let's just not have it at work too. Let's be very clear about what people need to do. So that's really important. So you have immediacy, you have clarity, you have the ability to cascade objectives through the organization, and you also have the ability to move the ship on a quarterly basis. And what I do is, at the end of every quarter, I sit down with all my leadership team, and I have everybody's performance-related pay in the organisation. So their score, which will be a percentage of 100% being on target, anything up to 125% or down to 75%. And we basically pick out high performers that I take out and recognise, and maybe we go out for a lunch or something every quarter.
You do your barbecues, I understand.
No, we do a barbecue. The other thing I do is cook, once a month in the summer in a staff, sort of barbecue that I get that on. So we have identify the high performers. We identify those people who are underperforming, and people who are below 100% 2 quarters in a row. We begin to have discussions about how we can improve performance. And the other thing is that we can calibrate how well we think the organisation is doing. And so every quarter, as a chief executive, you get visibility to everybody in the organisation. Now, it helps we have 400 people, right? Or 450 actually now. It's not 40,000, right? In which case you'd need to sort of segment it down. But the clarity in how it drives performance, and if I was starting any business from scratch now, I would introduce quarterly performance plan right from day one.
With performance-related pay and human nature, if you set me 3 or 4 things to do this quarter and it's incentivized financially, then isn't there a tendency for me to achieve those but forget everything else I have to do?
Well, I think the success in any business is about focus and clarity, right? So actually what I would do is, we have a rule that actually I'm going to set you 4 or 5. That's it for the quarter. Right? If you do other stuff outside that and you do, that's great, thank you very much, and you may get some recognition and reward for that, because we can calibrate at the end of the day. However, if the most important thing that you need to do is get a new customer or acquire 50,000 new customers in our case, then I'm going to make sure it's absolutely clear that's what you're measured on, and you know what you need. You know what success looks like 13 weeks from now. And if you don't know what success looks like 13 weeks from now, and you're in the middle of the quarter, then we both have a problem.
And Simon, how do you make sure that the MBOs or the performance-related pay incentives that you set are attainable but stretch?
So what we try and do when we set those objectives is, we try and say, look, what would we expect from somebody as an on-target performance, right? But we always give people the opportunity to overachieve and recognise that overachieving. So we can pay anything up to 150% of that bonus, let's say £1,000 in the example I was given, which could be an extra £500 a month that they would have in their check at the the end of the paycheck at the end of the period. So I think that's the first thing. The other thing I do before the quarter is I get my leadership team together and we sit down and we say, what are the most important things that we can do? Because what you don't want to have happen is, you don't want each function to set the priorities of what they think is important and actually not be part of a vision of where you're trying to take the organisation. And I think that connection across functions, agreeing what the top priorities that we're going to do as a company are, setting them, ensuring that gets cascaded down into people's performance-related pay for that quarter, measuring performance and see how well we did. And to be honest, some quarters we look at it and we say, well, maybe we only achieved 50% of what we wanted to. Why was that? What's our learning? And invariably the big learning is, you set yourself too many goals. You didn't have the focus that you needed to do, and you were trying to do too much. And one thing that is, as soul destroying for people, is trying to do too much and for not succeeding on a lot of things.
Is there a danger with performance-related pay that once you give it to people, they're always going to expect it, almost to the point that if you remove it, they'll say, well, you're not incentivizing me to do the performance, why would I do it?
Yeah, well, I think 90% of what people's salary is still going to be based on, doing the day job, right? And to be honest, if you're focusing people on stuff that is outside of the day job, then maybe you've got the day job wrong. And so the important thing is to ensure that actually what you're trying to build a culture of is performance, of recognition, and achieving and raising the bar. And people who raise the bar get an opportunity to get more. And if you are giving a lot more people more, then the chances are you're actually over-delivering on what you said you were going to be when you started off, which is what happens to us. Because what I try and do is, at the end of the quarter, look at some of our business results and financials and the P&L and say, okay, are we ahead or behind, and how does that compare to what we're telling our people we are? And sometimes you need a bit of adjustment or recalibration, in those scores as we go forward. And it does become part of the culture. It does become part of how we do it. We do a staff survey every year and sometimes every 6 months, and we ask people how they would describe LoveFiLM. And the way they do it is often they describe it as performance-driven, recognises reward, successful, driven type of organisation, and not long after that is actually a fun place to be in, a great environment to work in. And that balance for leaders is the constant thing you have to try and do, because what you're trying to do is retain all your best people, drive people, get extraordinary performance out of them. At the same time, you're trying to get those underperformers and helping them and coaching them and working through that. And sometimes you just need to take action where it's just not working out. And this sort of tool and this sort of approach gives you the visibility that's important as a leader.
But with that 2-quarter thing, you've got the transparency, so it's like the Jack Welch thing. Nobody's going to be surprised when you have that conversation.
And you know what? If somebody reaches the end of a year and they've had 4 reviews and sits down with their boss and they don't understand that they're doing exceptionally well or exceptionally bad, then there's probably something wrong in the leadership and the manager who sat down with them having those discussions, because they should. And what it gives me is it gives me the ability to identify who are the future stars, who are the future talent that we need to work with and continue to develop. Because, we're growing like a weed as an organisation. And one of my biggest challenges is ensuring that we've got the talent to cope with a business twice the size. When I was at Dell, Michael Dell had a great philosophy, which is what you did is you grew the business so quickly that they took half of it away, because that enabled you to grow the half that you kept even, more quickly again, because you could focus down on it. Yet that's the complete opposite of most people's mentality, which is, no, if I've grown this business, I'm going to keep it. And so what happens is you build up inefficiency because it becomes too big to manage, or there's too much complexity, or there's 2 other things, so you don't have focus. And I think that there's some real learnings in that sort of type of mentality that actually is good for us all to learn.
You've now got around 450 employees, so how are you going to make sure that challenger mentality and the entrepreneurial spirit that you've had so far carries through as you get bigger and bigger?
We've done the performance-related pay from the start, so we've sort of carried that through. The second thing is, don't underestimate the role of a leader in driving the culture. One of the most important things that any CEO or any managing director or any director of a business can be is just make sure you are driving the culture that you want to operate within that business. So, sad thing is, you've got to walk the walk. Right? You've got to deliver on the behavioural standards that you are saying to others, and you have to deliver that yourself. Don't say that we're a warm, cuddly family and then walk around with a big stick and beat people, because you know what? Your credibility will last a nanosecond, right? When you do that. So you have to be honest and truthful to yourself in terms of who you are. You have to not be afraid of asking for constant feedback about how you're doing. I just had a session where I did a 360 feedback, and you look at the results and you go through the denial, anger, revenge status, as people give you that feedback that everybody goes through. But the good thing is you've got to learn, and you've got to take feedback from the people that you're trying to influence and drive. So, you've got to walk the walk in terms of the behavioural standards that you set, right, as you go forward. And you've got to constantly communicate. Just when you think you've communicated the values enough, you're probably about 10% of the way there, right? Every opportunity you stand up. We have part of our business strategy, which we call our triangle strategy, which is about subscribers, and it's about members, and it's about visitors and how they come to the site and how we monetize the relationship we have with them. I go into meeting rooms and I see people describing our strategy to external people, and they've got the triangle and they're working through it, and we just constantly reinforce it and make it work. And people want that. They want the comfort of knowing the direction they're going, of consistency in values. And where you see behaviours that are inconsistent with your values, you need to take action. And whether it's 6 o'clock on a Friday night and everybody's going home, or whether it's in the middle of the day, or whether it's in front of lots of people or in front of no people, you've got to be consistent in terms of driving home those values. If customers are really important to you, and one of our values is loving our customers, as you'd expect from LoveFiLM, then you've got to ensure that at every turn and every meeting you are consistent about, okay, what is best for the customer? How do we make that decision? How do we drive that forward? And you have to catch yourself, and it's sometimes tough, and sometimes there's trade-offs that you have to make between team and customers and shareholders and all those other things. But once you've set those values, be consistent to them. You've got to live them and breathe them, and if you do that, it'll take a bit of time, but the organisation will begin to do it too.
Yeah.
And I've worked for some fantastic companies, right, who've had great values, and they've had the ability to do that. But not everything has been how I wanted it. And an opportunity in LoveFiLM has been to say, okay, what do I really value? What is really important? And how can we live and breathe that in our organisation? And people seeing it is just the most powerful thing to do. And as a leader and as a chief executive, the energy that you can get from making that happen, as opposed to just giving out energy, the energy you can get from seeing people change that is fantastic. And you will create a great company if you believe it.
So values can be very intangible, but they're very meaningful for you and your success at LoveFiLM. So how did you actually come up with them in the first place?
I think when you develop values, you have to involve people in doing it. It depends on the size of organisation you are. I had a very clear vision of what I wanted to be, the values. And why do I want them to be that? Because I believe that we will be successful if we live those values. That's why I believe them. Not because I have some personal desire to have that as a value, but because I believe it will make us more successful.
So it's almost like building the competitive advantage into the values in the first instance.
Yeah. So, you've got to, and there's some things you have to do in business which are basic, right? You have to look after your team and make them feel as though, that this is a great company to work for and make happen. So you have to ensure that becomes part of your values. One of our values is passion, right? And you have to have a passion for what you're going to. People who have a passion are better at doing something than people that don't, because they love doing it, and it's infectious, right? So that's one of our values. Innovation. We have created a business model that has, completely disrupted an existing business model and given customers better value, better choice, and better convenience. And as a result of that, we've sort of got a lot more people back into film watching than were before. So, that's one of our values, and we're in the entertainment business, and we have to be known if you're in the entertainment business providing a service. So one of our values is making us famous for the right stuff. And so it's about how can we spread the word. Every one of those 450 people has to be a positive ambassador for your business as we go forward. And if we live through those, if we make that work, and we live those day in and day out, and every month we have all-hand meeting where we communicate where we are, how we're doing, and I give awards to people in the business where they could be in any region, in any office, based on those values, which constantly reinforces the 5 values that we have.
Once you've identified a sector that you want to challenge in, how do you create a strategy in order for you to come up with the tactics and the ideas and the innovation to enable you to become number one in that space?
Yeah, I think with innovation, I am not precious where an idea comes from. Right, some of the best ideas are stolen ideas, and look, the people who originally were working on building, the likes of LoveFiLM and Screen Select and DVD 365 and DVDs on tap, lots of companies that came around, 5 or 6 years ago when this was all starting off, saw what was happening in the US with Netflix and said, there is a great model here. How can we make this work in the UK, and how can we make it work in other areas? And have done we've done a fantastic job of executing it and improving it and changing it and making it work. So ideas can come from externally. Ideas can come from internally, and part of the things, if there's good ideas for innovation, and innovation can be on a macro level, business strategy innovation, or it can be on a micro level, which is actually if we change the tags on something, we actually had, here's a good example of where innovation is. We had stickers on our DVDs, and as we merged companies together, etc., we had to get those stickers off, and they were a pain to peel off and do that. And the guy who runs our distribution centre went home, and his wife had one of those facial sauna steam things that you put your head in and you do that. And he put his DVD on, and he came off easy, in a fraction of the time. So he then went on to eBay, and he bought himself 10 facial sauna steamers, right? And they lined them up in the business, and they held it on for 5 seconds, and they pulled it off, and they held it on for 5 seconds. Now that's, right, It doesn't change our business strategy, but it's a great way of just thinking about solutions and making it work. And I gave him an innovation reward and recognition for doing that type of initiative, because it saved us thousands of pounds in terms of man hour and everything else. And that's a little example of where innovation can be huge in terms of new idea, new business model, better customer experience, or incredibly micro to solve a particular problem that the customer has or initiative that you need to work through. And you've got to try and get the balance of working both, because not everybody feels as though they are empowered to rework their business strategy or their business model or changing those other things. But a lot of people have fantastic ideas of how to do things better, how to give a better customer experience, how to make something work in a slightly different way that will be cost effective or better for you in terms of, the business. And we've just got to encourage those type of things.
When it comes to using customers to come up with ideas to improve your product and service, we interviewed Edward de Bono, and he said customers can be fantastic at telling you what's wrong with your product and service, but not always great to tell you how to improve it and what you should do in terms of new ideas to carry your business forward. Would you concur with that?
The thing that always amazes me, and we'll come back to passion again, the thing that always amazes me is how much passion our customers have for the service that we provide. Right, and they all come up with great ideas of things we can do better and things that we can improve. Now, often it's sort of tempered, topped and tailed with I'm dissatisfied of leads because I haven't got X and Y. Why don't you do X, to improve things? And we need to look at that. And we have, people in our customer service area who look at these and sort of come up with ideas and share them between. What I do is every week we pick the best customer comments and the worst customer comments that we have in that week, and we circulate it to everybody in the organisation. Because what I want people to see is how customers rate our service, both positively and negatively. And the interesting thing for me is the immediacy of a reaction you get. So an all-staff email goes out, these are the top 5 things and the top negative things we have. And the way we break it down is we break it down by our values of example of LOVEFiLM as an innovator, as having an all-star cast, of being famous for the right stuff, about being passionate, about those type of things. We break it down so that, again, it's an opportunity to reinforce the values based on what our customers are telling us, both positive and negative. And the emails that come around from people saying, that issue that Mr. Smith of Leeds just wrote in about, actually, we've got a solution we've been working on, we're just going to go publish it next week, and this is how we've been doing it. Thanks everybody for your work on doing that. Great, we solved a customer issue. Right? And visibility, ownership of the customer experience has to be everybody's responsibility, and that's a great example of how we can make that work.
It's interesting that you mention loving the customer as one of your values within LOVEFiLM, because I was watching a video on YouTube not long ago, which was Jeff Bezos talking about one of the things that he knows is that you have to have customer obsession. So you're both talking about this. Could you tell me, how does that value, putting a customer-centric organization, how does it manifest itself into everyday business activity?
To be a customer-centric business, it has to come from the top, right? You have to make trade-offs every single some minute of the day as a chief executive around customer experience and cost and efficiency and price and cash and all those other things. And if you're not putting the customer at the front and center of what you want to do as an organization, then you'll never achieve those goals. It's not something that I can do. Is why don't I delegate to a customer czar who is going to be responsible for customer experience, and they're buried in the organization at this particular level in this particular location, because you know what, they'll never get an opportunity to do that. And there's always 10 reasons why not to do something in terms of doing that. So you have to, one, say, this is important. Secondly, you have to demonstrate how you think that's important. And a good example of this is and this is really the difference often between entrepreneurial type environments and large corporate environments. As a managing director or leader in a smaller startup entrepreneurial environment, you sometimes have to grab that organization, I say by the throat, but I'm using that metaphorically to say, right, this is really important, right? I want everybody to do this, right? The consequence of doing this is that we'll have lower churn rate. We'll keep our customers for longer. It's going to be better. And this is how we're going to do it. And for the next month or 2 months, I want everybody to do that. In a large organization, it's harder to do that given the layers and challenge, etc., that you have, and disruption around day jobs and those other things. But in a smaller organization, you can do that. And it's vital that you do that and you demonstrate it. A good example is early 2007, we just completed the merger and integration onto one platform of LOVEFiLM and Video Island and Screen Select, and put those brands together. We were very internally focused for 6 to 9 months as we did all that migration, and we lost sight on the customer experience of it. And put my hand up, and I stood in front of the whole company and I said, this is the issue, this is what we did wrong, this is how we're going to change it, and this is the metrics that I will be measuring on a daily basis for the next 3, 4, 6 months, however long it takes, before we get it right. The other thing that I've done is I've said, we're making too many of those marginal decisions against the customer rather than for the customer. So if there is any decision in the organisation that needs to be made that is going to make the customer experience worse, I want to be involved, right? And that leadership about customer management and being customer centric is what you need to do. And also building into, if you have quarterly performance related plans that we talked about, building those into people to say, you know what, churn is the most important thing we can focus on, so how long we keep our customers for. I want everybody in the organisation for the next quarter to have a measure that 25% of their quarterly bonus is going to be paid on how well we do as a total organisation against churn. That's an example of having a quarterly goal where it can really work for you, because that not only affects the business, but it affects what they take home at the end of the quarter. And then you can begin to align people and make that work. And so what you're looking for as a chief executive or as a leader in the business is, what are those important things? What's the way to drive it? And constantly checking with yourself, and am I doing something here that's actually not right, or not clearly communicating what's required?
And I suppose having it as a quarterly theme as opposed to sort of having it for a week or two will make sure that it's not a fad. It becomes almost habitual within the organisation for the quarter, so that after the focus is away from that onto something else like churn or anything else, it will then at least be in the organisational subconscious. Is that the reason why it's a quarter?
That's exactly right, and that becomes a way to manage initiatives and growth, because it's very easy in the business, especially if you've got big structure, etc., to begin to create lots of initiatives, right? And I go back to the point of how do you be successful is by chopping stuff out rather than adding stuff in. That's the hard. I think I once went to a session talking about strategy, and somebody was presenting, can't remember, but they were saying that the hardest part about it, the most important thing about strategy is to decide what not to do. Because if I think about our business, we're in entertainment, we can do games, people have said about music, we've got other initiatives, we're currently in UK, Germany, in Scandinavia, what other markets can we go into? Yeah. There's a wealth of opportunities for us to look at in terms of what next, right? Yeah. We have finite management resource, we have finite people, finite cash that we have to do it with, right? Where do we focus and how do we make that work? And interestingly, in whatever size of organisation that I've been in, Dell was a very large organisation, and Riverdeep in Ireland, which was in the education space, was a much smaller organisation. The more you work through different sides of business, the more that truism absolutely works for you, which is just stay focused and ensure everybody's aligned with that goal, and create the vision and the goal and the competitor that you want to go after.
Talking about leadership during a crisis, you've obviously had to manage the situation back in 2008, October, November, when everybody thought we were in economic meltdown. Your distribution centre back in 2005, UK distribution centre, I understand, burnt down as well. So tell me about that, how you managed that, and also what leaders need to do at a time of crisis.
There are times where you need to move from being a very good manager into being a leader, right? And that is absolutely acute at the times of crisis, when people want direction, they want focus, and they want belief in you as an individual and your team that you can help them get out of this. And whether that be in the armed forces, whether that be in any situation, you need to have that belief, and you create that belief not at the time of crisis, but before. Right? That's where you lay your foundations for successful leadership, not at times of crisis. What happens in times of crisis is you demonstrate whether you have those core competencies that you need to succeed, but you lay the foundation way before then. Right? So always prepare for a crisis, right? And always prepare the inevitability that that's going to happen. 2005, get a phone call in a hotel. Simon, you may want to visit the distribution centre. Fire's broken out in a neighbouring unit. It's not that big. Why don't you have a look? So it was about 800, half a mile from the distribution centre. Get out of the hotel, walk over. As I walk over the bridge in North Acton, which goes over the tube line, I look and I can see flames 40, 50 feet in the air. Right? Bang smack where our distribution centre is. You could almost smell the melting plastic as it was going on. And you just think to yourself, well, you swear, normally is your first expression, right? And you think to yourself, you say, okay, right, what do I know and what don't I know? Right? What I do know is that service is going to be badly interrupted, right? And what I don't know is how bad that interruption is going to be. Rather than me spending time trying to work out to the nearest decimal point what the impact is going to be, I need to begin to mobilise, and we need to mobilise this team to ensure that we can notify customers, we can notify suppliers, we can notify all the stakeholders, employees, and obviously shareholders as well, in what the situation is and how do we do that. And I have a fantastic team, right, who just understood the business cold. Right? Understood the systems, understood the processes, understood the technology code, so that we could sit down and we got on a phone and we had a distribution centre that was about 200 yards away from our commercial offices, and we had a commercial office that was probably 100 feet by 200 feet sort of big. And what we did is we had a call and we laid out the plan of exactly what we're going to do, and we made an assumption that enabled us to plan. And the assumption was that everything was lost. Right? Now making that assumption, you may say, okay, well, that's obvious, wasn't it? But it's not. Sometimes you think about, okay, what can we salvage? How can we make this work? But that's a distraction. So if you work on the worst case, make the assumption about the worst case, and then begin to plan and say, okay, how do we build that? So whether it be a PR crisis, whether it be a fire, whether it be other sort of crises, what's the worst case? Work that as a planning assumption, and let's build this up. And we finished that call about 1 or 2 in the morning. By 7 in the morning, we had our customer communications written, we had our staff communication written, we pulled together the staff who were coming into work at 7:30 or so, and we held there was a Lebanese restaurant just by where we were in North Acton, and we literally had a town hall meeting on the steps of that cafe outside, and we said, this is the situation, this is what we're going to do. We turned all the commercial people and said, we don't need you, work from home. Right? We reconstructed our distribution centre in our commercial offices. We ran 2 or 3 shifts, 24 hours a day to build that up. And by the end of that day, we were receiving discs in. We had the benefit of actually 75% of our discs being out with customers. So, which is, very fortuitous, right? But that's the benefit of rental, a market, I suppose. So we were actually receiving discs that day because we had the post office backed up with tens of thousands of discs that had come back from customers who wanted a new disc. And then within 2 days, we were actually in that area, working shift system, sending discs back out and going. And it was, one of the hardest, but one of the most emotional, moments you go through when you think to yourself, we're going to survive, we're going to be better, we're going to be stronger, and we're going to win. And I think that is the culture that predominates within LoveFiLM, and it's those things that actually can be hugely beneficial for the business when you look back in hindsight, albeit at the time you're probably using a lot more swear words to yourself than you ever wished you would do to start with.
One of the things that successful companies like yourself seem to always have is a chief executive that's passionate about getting talent into the organization. So tell me about how organizations can get grade A talent.
Yeah, I think the thing is, we start off as a very small business. One thing that smaller business have as a disadvantage against very large, well-known businesses is the ability to, attract that talent in the first place, right? But the thing I find is that if you have a cadre or team of very high talented people migrate and navigate towards it. And one of the learnings, and one of the key business learnings that I took out of Dell and Michael Dell and how that works was where he had a very clear view, which is A quality people, A grade people, recruit A grade people. B grade people tend to recruit C-grade people because one, they're worried about whether they're better than them. Secondly, they worry about the quality. Maybe they don't know what good looks like and everything else. So as a chief exec, make sure the leadership team that you have working for you are the best possible talent you can have, even if that means paying for it. Right? And as a small company, it's often difficult, and you think about budgets, etc., because it will pay back in spades in terms of the quality of management you get, the quality of leadership, and the ability that you have to attract other great people. And as we've grown up as an organisation, not everybody's sort of kept pace with the growth that we have as jobs have got bigger, and that's natural. And you say thanks, and you celebrate the time that they've had with them, and then you move on. Other things are, there are gaps and competencies as you become bigger that you just need to go out and recruit new talent for. And when you're sat opposite the talent, if you've been looking and recruiting for a while, you have your internal gut barometer that's operating and looking for it. And what I look for passion, right, to come back to that word again, right? I look for people who have an understanding of why they're doing what they're doing and how that impacts into the bigger picture. And I'm looking for a proven set of results and a track record of achievement in terms of making that work. And those are just three things, and there's lots of other things as well. But I'm really trying to understand what are the personal drivers and motivation for that person to achieve those things, and do they have a track record of delivering? And invariably, if they do, then the chances are you can work with them. They may not have domain experience, they may not have the right industry experience, they may be that, but if they have that passion, the drive, the will to achieve, the intellect to get there, and a proven track record, chances are they can do it again with you if you help them do it.
Okay, so when you're interviewing somebody, you're looking less for the skills necessarily, but the things that will transfer into LoveFiLM, like the behavior and the habit of overachieving. If they've overachieved in the past, they're likely to overachieve for you in LoveFiLM. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, the other way to look at it is to say, why would somebody who hasn't consistently overachieved suddenly with you become a fantastic overachiever? Now, that is an incredibly arrogant, thing to say, well, I'm a better manager, I can do this, I can do that. The chances are there's a reason why, that hasn't happened. And just get those people that have done it. Because you know what, if they've done it, help them do it again. Give them the keys. Let them get on with it. Let them succeed. And, and empower them to make these decisions to do it again.
Knowing the fact that exceptional people don't want to work for mediocre managers, let's just say you've got a manager in an interview that isn't able to sell very well. What do you do then? I mean, do you as the chief executive have to come in and sort of close the deal, as it were?
Well, I think that's where your culture comes in, right? That you don't, an organisation is a big, living, breathing thing that, that changes all the time, and I can't take responsibility, and, I'm sure I know we all have strengths and weaknesses, right? But can't take responsibility for every person's management in the organisation. We introduced recently, even though we're relatively small, a management development program for all our middle managers and our high performers to go on to begin to develop those emotional intelligence skills, the leadership skills, the things that are going to drive and make a difference, alongside their basic competencies and ability to do a job. So, it does need development. It's like any new muscle, that you exercise. You need to practice it, you need to work it, you need to get feedback on how that's going as you go forward.
But I think a lot of chief executives or a lot of people out there think that sales is somewhat a dirty word. When it's the lifeblood of all organizations. Would you say that even you as chief executive, I mean, one of your key roles is salesmanship?
Yeah, I think we're all selling every day, right? That's when we're out there on the street and we chat to people, we're selling in some way, shape or form. Never say you're not a salesman, because everybody is and needs to be, right, in the job they have. What you've got to be incredibly careful with when you're recruiting talent is that you're not overselling, right? Because what will happen is you'll get that disconnect in the early stages of somebody coming into a job that ultimately leads to disappointment, right? And you have to, because you can't do the management all the time, because you can't do everything all the time, and because different people have different needs, right? There's certain groups in the organisation that other people are much better at managing than I am, right? So give them to them, make that work. And ensure that you are constantly revisiting that. And that's where our quarterly performance review and cycle helps us as a business in terms of looking at what's working and what's not working. Yeah. And one thing that just really excites me in an organisation is where you see people that potentially aren't performing and suddenly they get it, they want to work, they get the energy, they get the drive. I sort of in LoveFiLM call it a swallowing the red pill. They just like, this is it now. I'm off, and watching them perform and watching them grow and giving them more responsibility and giving them more recognition and remuneration as they go forward. That's pretty exciting.
So the LoveFiLM revenue model has been very successful. So and I understand that you even say that the subscription model in the online world is a beautiful thing. So could you just tell us what are some of the key takeaways that we can learn from the success of LoveFiLM's revenue model?
Yeah, I think, online, if you build a model that's built on subscription, right, then you have an annuity stream that you can constantly work with, and then it becomes how much does it cost me to acquire a customer, how long do I keep them for, what gross margin do I have for that period of time to work out a lifetime value. And as long as my acquisition cost is lower than my lifetime value, I'm adding to shareholder value. If it's the other way around, I'm losing it as we go forward. In some markets in the early days, to get the message out there requires more acquisition costs than lifetime value, so you need to constantly work on trying to redress that balance as you go forward. And if you get it working well, and it resonates with customers, don't force people into things or lock people into things for a long period of time. We have no 12-month contract. People can come and go when they like, right? What does that mean? That means that actually every single experience, every single transaction, every single interaction with us is an opportunity to give a bad customer experience that we just can't afford to do because people can walk, right? So it keeps us really honest. And you don't reach that stage where you're relying on inertia, in 12 months and oops, missed the end of the contract, sorry, you're in for another 12 months sort of situation. Now, would it be great for us to have longer contracts in order to then get a greater lifetime value that we could invest in the customer? Yes, it would, and we constantly have to try and do that. But a subscription model, if it works, I often describe it as a thing of beauty. Right? It's an annuity stream that is just fantastic. On the other hand, transactional models are really hard. Every transaction you have to try and work at to make that transaction happen. But it's easier to get into, and you're not asking people to sign up for long-term commitments, and they're just buying a DVD for £10 or whatever, so it's actually lower barrier to entry than signing up for a multi-month subscription. So there's pros and cons in each one of those, and you've got to ensure that your marketing is geared towards, getting the customer in the way that you want to get your customer and how that works. And if you can get a subscription model, I think it's fantastic. And obviously it's high value, and you just manage different metrics like acquisition, churn, etc. But it's the same in the transactional world, right? Where it's about, once I've got a customer, how can I get them to spend more money with me? How can I get them to come back on a more regular basis, and what other ways can we monetize that relationship?
Yes, Sam, because that whole inertia model where you're going to get somebody locked up for 12 months and then just hope and pray that they forget to cancel their subscription, it's not exactly putting the customer first. Whereas you've got a model where if somebody wants to renew, they do. If they don't, they can walk away any time. So it's kind of putting the customer first again, isn't it?
And we get feedback on why didn't I know that I needed to cancel a certain particular time to do that. And we just have to constantly work on ensuring the communication, the sign-up process is clear about how that works and what happens.
Yeah, because I know that LoveFiLM is private equity VC backed, so I'd have thought that they would love your subscription model. Yeah,
and inherently when you do value a business, a subscription model is valued higher because it's easier to see the metrics, right? In order to get the revenue, I can look at how much do I get on average per customer per month, and how many customers go and how many customers come. And then you can build a long-term model based on that with a decay of customers or an increase in customers. Fortunately we're in the latter place, which is growing customers, so that constantly happens, and therefore it's easier to value.
You were involved in the branding, obviously, in building LoveFiLM. You're also involved back in the USA when you were at PepsiCo in building the Pepsi Max brand. So you certainly know what you're doing. What advice would you give to a brand manager or a head of marketing that wants to get their brand to stand out as market leader in this very digital, interactive world?
Yeah, I think it's tough, right? And a certain amount of luck needs to come with it in terms of what's required. I think the understanding, to me, the customer benefit and the customer reason why they should use a brand, right? You go back to William Hesketh Lever of Unilever fame, Sunlight soap. What was it? It was saying, I represent constant quality, I represent, sort of, almost an insurance against that, right? And just the same as it takes you a long time to build a brand reputation, it also can be incredibly quick in losing it, if you're not focused on constantly providing against the customer proposition. So what is the customer proposition? LOVEFiLM, the brand, people say to me on a regular basis is, why I like LOVEFiLM is because it does what you say it will do. Right, and therefore I tell everybody else and all my friends that actually it's a great service to use because it really does provide films in a simple way, and it's cheap, relative to some other options, but it's choice, value, and convenience, and so we built the brand on that basis. And in order to resonate with our customers, we talk about loving film, having a passion for film, and being slightly irreverent to certain people or situations, which is about the personality of the brand as you go forward. So I think if you think about the layers of branding, it's about what is the consumer reason why they would build a brand in the first place, right? Pepsi Max was a good example. Pepsi Max was all about, why should I drink Pepsi Max? I should drink Pepsi Max because it has all the taste of regular Coke, right? But with no calories, so I don't need to worry about that, right? That's the customer proposition. However, the personality is wild, out there, exciting, very masculine, sort of exciting brand to be part of, which is where a lot of our been there, done that type of commercials came from originally when we launched the product. So it's two things, and being true and building an organization based on that is true. So our company values, and we're a single brand company, so that helps, right? But our company values are consistent with our brand values as we go forward and in terms of how we operate and how we work.
At the Internet World Conference this year, you mentioned that PR, if done well and properly, can enable organizations to punch significantly above their weights in terms of, having limitations in marketing budgets and everything else. So can you tell us about how companies should make sure they are using PR to the maximum and getting most benefit and efficiencies from their PR spend?
PR can be a great tool. PR can be a cost sink if you don't manage it properly, and I think you have to put resources against, what are you trying to achieve? And the thing about PR is identify who your target audiences are, and there are various different audiences. There's trade, there's consumer, business to business, or whatever you want to focus on. But PR only works if you've got something to say that's of interesting to other people. And you know what? Us saying that we've changed our service from X to Y, or we've done something with the technology, or we've changed the colour of this to that, etc., is not necessarily going to be the most important thing that they're going to read. But if it's about, something that's really interesting and relevant to people, we do a lot with top 10 lists, whether it be, who's the sexiest Bond girl, which is the best Bond car, which is, those other things. And that really resonates with people because we know people like lists and league tables, etc. From a business point of view, I think we are a business that is really trying to punch above our weight in a very crowded industry in entertainment. I think we are a fun company that is really doing something different and offering the customer, a better experience than they've had before and bringing people back to film. And that's sort of part of the message that we talk about and how we're doing that and how we innovate and some of the cultural things we talked about. So having a relevant story. And the other thing is pick people that know the journalists or know the people that you're going to work with. So pick experts. And for relatively low cost, like a few £1,000s a month rather than tens of £1,000s a month, you can actually get some good experts out there who can help you achieve what you want to try and achieve in PR.
And that comes down to agency choice or...
Yeah, and with that, what you have to do is you have to find the chemistry that works for you, someone that you believe in and have confidence in, and somebody that understands and gets your business. All of our PR people that we work with, and we have different ones for consumer and different ones for that, get us. They understand LOVEFiLM. They know what it's about. They come to events we have. They understand the people and they understand what we're trying to do. And they have as much fun being part of us as we are.
It looks like the same thing you're hiring people, you're measuring people against when you're hiring them. It's the same thing when you're talking about hiring suppliers as well.
It's an extended family.
Yeah,
you're absolutely right. Working with agencies is an extended family. And they've got to have the same beliefs and the same way of working that you have. And don't be seduced by grand titles of what they've done or great sort of profiles in history books, etc., because it's how you work with these people and how you interact with people that's critical. especially as chief executive, and are they bought into what you want to achieve?
Simon, you talk about passion a lot, and I know that very successful people always say that you've got to find what you're passionate about and just do that. But in terms of, there could be some people watching this thing, I'm not passionate about my job, my boss, my organisation, etc., etc. So what advice would you give to those people that understand the importance of it, but they just haven't found their passion yet? How do you find it?
For most people, the passion is within, right? It's you can spend your life, it's the old sort of Buddhist saying, you can spend your life searching for something, but actually your life is the search, right? I think that, I've worked in soft drinks, and I've worked in computers, and I've worked in education, and I've worked in entertainment, right? And the thing I like most is how an organisation works, and how we grow, and how we develop, and how we target the market, how we provide great service to customers, how we work well. That can apply in any industry that you operate, right? And it can apply in any other area. So, look for the diamonds that are in your own backyard, and try and find where that passion is and what unlocks you. If you're really that unhappy, life's too short. But I'm not going to advise people to hand in resignation and do that. But, the key thing is look for what's really important to you, and actually often it's there. And it's a mindset, and it's a mentality, and it's around, can I achieve this, and can I make a difference? There are very few. One of the things that I found fascinating when I worked in PepsiCola, and I headed sales operations, worldwide for the international business, and it's great because I saw people in China, I saw people in India and in Russia, and Asia, and all the different areas that you go to, South America, and I spent time in every market. And human beings, although we all have cultural differences and we do things in different ways, the basic reason that we come to work is pretty similar, right? I want to get paid. I'd really like to enjoy it. I like to work with people I really want to work with, and I want to have a vision and a passion for why I'm doing this and why am I involved in doing it, right? And wherever you are. And so, the fundamental thing you can do as a chief executive is tap into that and say, okay, what are we trying to do, and satisfy those questions. And if you're not giving people a reason other than a paycheck at the end of the month to do X and Y, if they're not part of creating something, building something, enjoying something, then the first opportunity they get, they go, and you'll have high turnover. And we haven't got it right in many respects, and we continue to learn, we continue to change, but you've got to constantly work at it.
Simon, for a newly appointed chief executive that maybe have just come up through succession planning internally, what would be the one piece of advice you give to a newly appointed chief exec?
I think that you have to build, an infrastructure of people around you. And you know what? Sometimes being a chief exec can be a pretty lonely job because you're the guy at the top, and you need to sometimes tell people things they don't want to hear. My advice would be build a network in the organisation that you can reach down into to understand what's really going on. Right? The best people to speak to about what is happening in a job or how it's going are the people that are doing the work, because they know. And often they'll say to you, you know what, Simon, this is mad. Why are we doing this? This just isn't working, or that's not happening. And you may not get that message back through. So spend time, pick, packing and shipping, spend time customer service, spend time with the technical people who are developing to understand what they're doing on a day-to-day job. And as a chief executive, your role is to get rid of the treacle. Right? Get the treacle out of the way of what people need to do so they can do those heroics that make them achieve extraordinary things. And the only way you get to understand that is not by asking your direct reports who ask their direct reports who ask the direct reports below what's happening, is to go out there and speak it, and get out and about and speak to people and listen to what people are saying. And it's very motherhood and apple pie, I know, but I think for me personally, that's worked incredibly well.
Yeah, so communicating all the way down the organisation frequently, all the values you were
and
talking about
listening to
earlier.
what is going on, listening to what is happening, listening to those roadblocks. Why are things late? Why are things often not working how you want them to do? Why are things not being achieved? Do people really understand what you're trying to achieve? And you only get you host regular brown bags, you get out there, you sit down with people, spend time getting to know people. Now, in a hugely super large organisation, you can't do that, but you can get to know 100 or so people that you can speak to on a regular basis to understand what's going on. And that's not to undermine the hierarchy of how their boss reports or does that. That's just so that you can have a dialogue. And it's perfectly within your right as a chief executive to speak to anybody in that organisation to find out what's going on, bar none.
Simon, just so we're clear, brown bagging, you mentioned brown bagging, is that a new business term that we should all be aware of, or is that simply lunch?
Sit down and have lunch. You know, it's, you know, when I worked in the States, it was an expression that basically everybody brings their lunch a brown bag, you sit down there and you do it. And actually, it used to be delivered often a sandwich in a bag of crisps and a fruit in a brown bag. So that's how it came around.
Simon, Chief Executive of LOVEFiLM, it's been an honour to have you with us on Bevo. Thank you very much for your inspiration, education.
Pleasure. Best of luck.
Bevo.com